David Thompson said, Duncan from Cop Talk TV has posted earlier today that Isak could use the FIFA rule Article 17. Yeah, I'll stop you right there, David. With respect to Duncan and anybody else that's banging on about this Article 17, it's quite simply a load of nonsense. I've discussed it many, many times, and I don't like people getting misinformation. Now, I'm not saying anybody's doing that intentionally, and certainly I'm not pointing the finger at Duncan because there's been loads of this, but it doesn't apply because for Article 17 to come in, the player has to have a valid reason to leave the club. And let's say Newcastle hadn't paid him in a month, as an example. Well, that's one of the few reasons that perhaps Article 17 could be triggered. But in this scenario, think of it this way. People believe that he can buy himself out of the remainder of his contract and just walk off to Liverpool. But that leaves Newcastle absolutely out on the transfer fee. So what do you think happens there? Well, of course, they're going to go after Isak and Liverpool for compensation. So people need to look a little bit deeper into these things before trying to sound clever about them, because it's not possible. It won't be happening. And anybody that's trying to fill Liverpool fans full of optimism or hope that Isak can simply pay up 2-3 years of his contract and walk out the door, I believe they're very, very, very wrong. And it's certainly not something that we're going to be giving any more light to on here. I feel comfortable we're going to get Gay at this point. It's certainly all signs are pointing in that direction. The stuff around Isak, well, I guess it depends where you're reading your information from, how you feel about this, because some Newcastle accounts and the likes of Luke Edwards are still out there giving it the big and saying, yeah, we'll see September the 1st. But like I've said all the way through, what do they win? You know, what do they actually win here if they keep Isak, an unhappy player who isn't going to give a shit and is going to want out with the next available turn? So even Lee Ryder was writing a piece earlier on, and it's for, I think it was the Newcastle Chronicle. It's the sister paper of the Echo. And I had a read of the article, and to be fair to Lee Ryder, it was a very well-written article that talked a load of sense. But one paragraph in Lee's article really jumped off the page to me, and I want to read it out to you guys now. Said, in business terms, what Newcastle's main backers, the PIF, will try to look at the most is paying a footballer £120,000 per week to train alone and not concentrate on the field and sell no shirts off it. It has no logic whatsoever. Which is right. Like I've said, there is no upside here to Newcastle. If Newcastle's owners think that they're going to prove a point by holding Isak there and not selling him, I don't know who they're trying to prove the point to, because in my opinion, the damage has already been done. Agents, players, they're going to look at what's gone on with Isak at Newcastle and they're going to think, do we need that headache? Do we need it? Like I've said, people think I'm being disparaging, but it really shows that Newcastle aren't ready yet. They aren't there yet as a club, as a fan base, and behind the scenes, they just don't know how to act in these situations. And it's been an absolute shit show from start to finish. How it ends up, it remains to be seen. But like I've said, if we don't get Isak, I won't lose any sleep over it as long as we bring in somebody else. But the damage has been done now to Newcastle's reputation. Newcastle charged atmosphere resulting in bad tackles. So, yeah, I've had a couple of people bring this up to me, Christian. I refuse to believe that players would go out to intentionally try to injure another player. I'm sure, yes, the atmosphere will get the players up, but that's a good thing. You know, the fans at Newcastle are always very supportive of their team. Same at Anfield for us when Liverpool are playing, and it's a big night like this. I just refuse to believe that a player would ever go out and intentionally try to hurt another player, because they understand what it feels like. You know, they understand what it's like to be out. They understand the rehab process and the mental toll it takes. So I think it's going to be a tasty game. I think everybody's going to go out to try and win it, of course, and prove a point. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say I believe they're going to go out to try and injure other players. I certainly don't think that's the case. Ben Barrett said the only difference between Visa and Isak is Visa hasn't refused to train and play. Geordies are such hypocrites. So I'm not pulling you up on this, Ben, because certainly not you that said it, but this narrative of refusing to train and play, Isak is training every day up there about 3 o'clock, 3:30. And it wasn't Isak that pulled himself out of the game against Celtic. That was his manager. And that's where this all kind of started to snowball. So I've always found that narrative, and again, Ben, not aimed towards you, fella, I've always found it a strange one, because it doesn't really match reality, does it? Now, the pre-season tour, perhaps he did refuse to go on that. I'm not sure. But he is training every day. He's reporting there at about 3 o'clock, 3:30 when the other players have gone. And he's been met with a fair bit of abuse on his way in as well. Sasha Tavalieri thinks Newcastle and Bayern are ready to meet the price that Chelsea want for Nicholas Jackson. He goes on to say that both clubs are there for him and that Newcastle obviously view him as a replacement for Alexander Isak. On top of that, it does look as if the move or the rumoured interest from Newcastle in Strand Larsen of Wolves, that is not going to bear any fruit. That's probably, excuse me, bit of a hiccup. That's probably the fairest way. Wolves just simply can't sell, won't sell, and totally understand why as well. I want to go back to another piece here from Sammy Mockbill of the BBC, who said nothing can happen before the game between Liverpool and Newcastle, but I'd be flabbergasted if Liverpool don't make some sort of approach next week for Alexander Isak. And that seems to be the perceived wisdom over the last 24 hours. Lots of journalists have been writing about expecting this bid to come from Liverpool after the game on Monday night. I've never really understood why wait until after Monday. I don't think it's going to make any difference to how Liverpool are going to be welcomed, shall we say, at St James's Park. So let's wait and see what happens. I struggle to get a read on the Newcastle side of this because they've been up and down and all over the place with the reportings, the briefings, what's happening. Even listening to Eddie Howe talk, and they have to talk about a possible reconciliation, but I don't see it really. Do you? Do you think Isak's forgotten his drive into training every day and the abuse he's been receiving and the banners outside? He's not going to forget that, is he? He's going to see how quickly it turned from love to hate. And I'm not saying Newcastle fans are alone in this. Every club's fan base, when they feel disappointed or let down by a player, it hurts. But like I've said, Isak seems really intent on moving, and it'll be interesting to see what does happen because they're not winning in this. If they keep him there, they've won nothing. If they let him rot in the reserves, they've won nothing. They just look petty on the world stage. So let's wait and see what pans out. I guess let me try and link all the stuff together. So I was watching, I was looking at a couple of screenshots that were sent my way earlier on from some Newcastle accounts who were talking about the situation. And they're saying that Craig Hope has basically said it's very unlikely that Isak will leave before the window shuts. And I couldn't really find those quotes when I went looking, to be honest, but I did see a good piece and a good few quotes from Lee Ryder, which I've spoken about earlier on. And he said, in business terms, what Newcastle's main backers, PIF, will look at the most, paying a footballer £120,000 a week to train alone and not contribute on the field and sell no shirts off it, has no logic whatsoever. Also, he said, the game may change for Alexander Isak after Monday as he eyes Liverpool move. So that's encouraging, to say the least. And there's been a few kind of variations of that. Like Sammy Mockbell, BBC, said nothing can happen before the game between Liverpool and Newcastle, but I'd be flabbergasted if Liverpool don't make some sort of approach next week for Isak. And that's kind of the flavour of what I've been hearing as well. Jamie Carragher has been speaking about the situation as well. And Carragher said, if Liverpool bid more than £130 million, it's too much. You'd want Kylian Mbappe for the fee. Now, I think Carragher needs to stop with this Kylian Mbappe comparison, because I think we all know if Kylian Mbappe went to the open market right now, you're not getting him for £130 million. I think it'd be way, way, way higher than that. And technically, it was a free signing for Madrid. He said, from the moment Isak made his debut against Liverpool at Anfield, he has stood out, but there are concerns, which I can't disagree with. There are. He said, now 25, he's yet to prove he has the durability of Salah. He's failed to start 36 games over his 3 seasons in England, and 10 of his last 44 goals, league goals, were penalties. He would not be taking them at Anfield. But what I'd like to kind of push back a little bit on there is, he might not be taking them at Anfield, but the whole idea of this, of what Liverpool are trying to do, is to take the burden off Mohamed Salah. Like, we've spoken at length about him having 52% or something like that of the goal involvement for Liverpool last season. So the idea is to take the burden and the onus off Mo and to share the goals around. So maybe Gakpo chips in with his fair share, which he does, to be fair. Ugo Ekitike as well, Isak. That's the thought process here, is not to be somewhat reliant. And of course to look to the future as well.